This is WFYI News Now. It's February 10th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, an update on what happened at the State House last week during the ongoing legislative session. And $1.3 billion were expected to be bet on the Super Bowl, but some worry that legalized online sports betting has made it too easy and potentially too addictive to place bets.
Often it takes for things to get particularly bad for people to seek help.
Those stories coming up. But first, hundreds of middle school students have left Indianapolis Public School District in the last year. From WFYI's Education Desk, Sydney Daudelin has more on what that might mean for the district.
Nearly 800 middle school students have left the schools managed by Indianapolis Public Schools District in the last year, according to state data. The sharp enrollment decline follows a district-wide overhaul designed to consolidate resources and save money. A major part of the plan, known as Rebuilding Stronger, was separating elementary and middle school students through the creation of new middle schools. When districts lose enrollment, they also lose state funding. An IPS spokesperson says they anticipated a decline in enrollment and believe it will rebound quickly. I'm Sydney Daudelin.
A property tax reform debate kicks into high gear. Senate lawmakers advance a bill to cut in half the number of early in-person voting days. And a Senate committee debates an education measure to promote fostering a national identity. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on last week at the State House.
Governor Mike Braun's property tax reform proposal received testimony in a Senate committee. The plan would roll back homeowners' property tax bills to 2021 levels and cap future increases. Local government leaders are worried it would decimate their budgets and affect public safety, but Braun told leaders to prove it, that their budgets aren't bloated with unnecessary spending. Indiana counties currently offer 28 days of early in-person voting before elections. Senate Republicans want to cut that to 14, saying it will help save money. Opponents worry it will further hurt Indiana's already poor voter turnout. And a bill that prohibits civics courses that create a national identity around racial and gender discrimination, victimization, class struggle, privilege, or systemic exclusion got pushback in a Senate committee. Opponents say the bill would prevent teachers from discussing history like segregation or slavery. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
And for our final story today, $1.3 billion. That's how much Americans were expected to bet on the Super Bowl matchup over the weekend. It highlights the growing number of people who place sports bets after the U.S. Supreme Court legalized it several years ago. And while it's a fun hobby for many, Side Effects Public Media's Ben Thorpe reports, health experts say there is a risk that some people may develop a problem.
Gambling addiction has long been linked to an increased risk of suicide, and some early research, not yet peer-reviewed, points to an uptick in both debt and bankruptcy linked to a state's legalization of sports betting. Some worry that the flood of TV ads and the ease of placing bets on a mobile app around the clock has changed how addictive sports betting can be, and how easily people can develop a problem.
In fact, the artificial intelligence-generated micro bets and parlays that allow someone to place literally thousands of potential bets on a single contest is really a big part of the problem.
That's Mark Gottlieb. He leads the Public Health Advocacy Institute at Northwestern University School of Law. The institute sued the online sports betting company DraftKings 2 years ago, accusing it of deceptive marketing practices. Gottlieb says many of the supports for problem gambling come after someone has already developed a problem.
We're offering them aid and trying to rescue them with counseling, but rather putting up guardrails to prevent that from happening.
But sports betting industry insiders told Side Effects that they comply with state and federal laws. They say that legalized sports betting is safer than unregulated markets. They also point to statistics from the National Council on Problem Gambling that show just 1% of gamblers have a serious problem, but that's 2.5 million people. And Mark Potenza, a professor of psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine, says those numbers don't capture the entire problem. That's because only a fraction of people will ever seek help.
So oftentimes it may go undetected and it may impact functioning in multiple domains. Work, finances, relationships. Often it takes for things to get particularly bad for people to seek help.
And just to be clear, most people who play sports bets in the U.S. have fun, maybe earn a little, lose a little, without developing any problems. But several states have seen an uptick in calls to problem gambling lines, including Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Potenza believes that the ability to bet not just on the result of the game, but on lots of little events, like which player will make the first basket, poses a particularly dangerous problem.
Where do we draw the line or the balance between permitting individual liberties versus promoting public health? And that may involve restricting some of the liberties, particularly with respect to protecting vulnerable populations.
Vulnerable groups like adolescents and young adults, he says. There are concerns that younger people are engaging in sports betting. That worries public health experts because up to 5% of adolescents and young adults who gamble develop a disorder. Here's Mary Lay. She's with the Indiana Problem Gambling Awareness Program.
Because a lot of people don't think about it as being gambling. It's just kind of a fun thing you do on your phone, like playing a game.
And it's the gamification that worries many public health experts. Lay says video game addiction may be connected with gambling addiction. She points out that things like mystery purchases in video games with randomized rewards, called loot boxes, often have an element of gambling to them. But Lay says she hasn't seen a major uptick in calls in Indiana just yet.
We've only been doing this for 5 years now. Sports gaming only began in Indiana in 2019. So I think we'll start to see how that is impacting hotline usage.
Research about the impacts of sports betting is still in the early stages, but concerns have already led to scrutiny at the federal level. Lawmakers are considering further regulations, which would limit gambling ads during sports broadcasts and require affordability checks on gamblers making large numbers of bets. I'm Ben Thorpe, Side Effects Public Media.
If you or your loved one is struggling with problem gambling, you can reach the National Problem Gambling Hotline at 1-800-GAMBLER. That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.